Hey writers, you're listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. We're your hosts. I'm Laura, one of Kobo Writing Life's author engagement managers.
And I'm Rachel, Kobo Writing Life's other author engagement manager. On today's episode, we chatted with USA Today bestselling author Cali Mann, who is currently working with Kobo Originals on a new series. She writes paranormal romance, the sexy kind, with why choose hunky shifters, sexy vampires, and women who stand up for themselves. She learned romance by reading through her mother's entire gothic romance collection in her teens, so her and romance go way, way back. When she's not writing, she spends her time streaming shows, playing video games, and pestering her two tuxedo cats.
We chatted with Cali about her upcoming series with Kobo Originals, the Wickem Academy, and delved into book one, which is called Heir of Shadows. She told us about her journey as an indie author and what her writing process looks like, and why she loves writing in multiple POVs, and the fun she has creating magic systems and world building for her paranormal romance series. There's lots of great tips for writing paranormal romance in here, and I think you'll all enjoy. So take a listen.
Okay, we are joined today by author Cali Mann. Cali, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. We're excited to talk to you. Can you kind of just start us off by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I've been self-publishing since 2019. I write primarily paranormal romance, lots of reverse harem, and all the good stuff, the sexy shifters, the handsome vampires, and like I said, all the good stuff.
Definitely all the good stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about what your journey to becoming a writer was like? Did you always know you wanted to be an author?
I always wanted to be an author. I did want to be a writer when I was a kid. I was a high school poet, and I won a few competitions doing that, and I really enjoyed it. I wrote my first novel when I was 15. I had read through my mom's entire romance collection of gothic romance, all those bodice rippers of the 80s and that sort of thing. And I wrote a smuggler's romance historical, and it was very exciting at 15. But I didn't go with it anywhere. When I went to college, I took a few writing classes, and they really crushed my dream. And I was like, not going to make it, never going to do it. So I went into teaching, and I was a teacher for many, many years. And then a few years ago, a friend of mine came to me and said, well, why don't we do this NaNoWriMo thing? And I said, sure, let's do it. And so that kicked off my writing career, and I got into self-publishing, and that's where I came to be.
I'm kind of curious how you went from the bodice rippers of the 80s and that more historical vibe and ended up writing and falling in love with paranormal romance.
So I am a Dungeons and Dragons kid. I used to play that in high school, and I enjoy fantasy and escapism. My husband and I met during the WoW years, right? World of Warcraft. And we actually came home early from our honeymoon to go and play more World of Warcraft because we couldn't get enough of it. So fantasy has been in my blood. I love fantasy and I love paranormal. And particularly, despite all of the controversy around Harry Potter these days, Harry Potter was a love of mine, and the whole Academy vibe was something that I really enjoy.
This is a deeply off-topic question, but as somebody who has recently started her first D&D campaign, I do need to know your favorite D&D class to play.
Probably wizard. I do like playing a wizard.
Nice. I went barbarian. I have no magic, and I realized that was a huge mistake, but I'm learning.
It's super fun, and it can be in both classes and have a great time. So you just kind of get used to where you want to be on the field. Do you want to be right up by close and personal, or do you want to be shooting from afar?
All very important lessons. And I do genuinely feel like I could ask you so many more, but we are a writing podcast. So I'm going to steer us back on topic and ask a little bit about your publishing journey as an indie author. You started out as NaNoWriMo. How do you get from that writing sprint world of banging out those 50,000 words in a month to publishing your first novel?
Yeah. So when I was first thinking about being a writer when I was a kid, indie publishing didn't exist. It wasn't a thing. And it wasn't seen as something that was super cool. So when I started writing these sprints, I got involved with getting some critique groups. I worked with a company called Scribophile, which does online critique groups, which are wonderful. And I met some great people that way. and they were all self-publishing. And I was like, wow, this seems like fun. I'd like to do that. So I self-published a few stories, and wasn't really super excited about it until I had a friend come to me and she said, hey, your stuff isn't doing so great. You want to try this reverse harem stuff? And I was like, yes, that sounds like fun. And so I got into reverse harem. And my first series that was really a breakout for me was my Heir Academy, which came out in 2019. So.
And what big changes have you noticed in indie publishing since your start in 2019?
Oh, lots of changes. It's always a changing field. I think there's just so many opportunities now to do things in different ways, whether it's direct sales on your website, it's doing a Kickstarter, it's offering serial subscriptions. There's just so many paths to get to success. And there's just so many different ways that you can do it. You don't have to do just retailers anymore. You don't have to do, just Kindle Unlimited anymore. There's so many other options. And I think that's a really great opportunity for writers. And it's a great opportunity for readers because you get to get your stories in the way that you love them the best. I have a teenage daughter and her favorite stories are serials. She just loves and gobbles them up. She was like, read 100K serial the other day. And I was wonderful. Hey.
We want to talk to you about your upcoming release with Kobo Originals. But before we do, I'm curious about this critique group, because through talking with authors and being a part of this community, taking critique is a skill in and of itself, being able to handle critique. And I'm wondering if you, what you have learned in order to absorb critique, not take it personally, and make your work better.
I think one of the hardest things for me personally is that if whenever I look at the story again, I tend to rewrite it. So taking critique and actually making this story better and not turning it into a whole different story is a big challenge for me. But I really like the group on Scribophile that I found because it was very positive reinforcement, but also gave me a lot of tips on skills in writing more long form fictions because I came from poetry, right? So I came from a spot where it was super simple and super short and not a lot of details to it, where there's a lot of rules for publishing a novel and how does everything come together. And so that was really great for me. But they were open enough to be like, whatever you want to write, that's great. It doesn't have to be on our model or on our style. We want to keep your own style, but here's some tips about not throwing a bunch of information right up front, even though it's a fantasy world, things like that are super helpful.
That's so great. And as I mentioned before, you are working with Kobo Originals now on the series, The Wickem Academy. Can you tell us a bit about how this came about?
I approached one of the Kobo representatives, Tara, at one of the conventions, and that was great to talk to her. I did have a friend who had been involved in Kobo Originals, and I was really excited about the opportunity. I have been looking at more international sales, and going through Kobo is such a great chance to get to get that audience, right? And so she said, send me a proposal. And so I sent a proposal over to Jessica at the time, and I was just excited about this opportunity to do Dark Academy. So it's been like one of my current obsessions, Dark Academy. I love Sabrina. I love Wednesday. I love Riverdale, all of these shows and things that are kind of leading up into this moment for me. And I've just been really like, I want to do something Dark Academy, but I don't want to do the usual, oftentimes we do air, fire, earth, these kind of elemental powers. And I was like, let's bring some of that D&D knowledge into this and really bring it into more interesting powers and skills that they might have.
Well, Rachel and I got to read an advanced copy of Heir of Shadows, and we're really excited to get into it and chat with you more about it. But for those who haven't heard about the book yet, can you give our listeners kind of an overview of what the book is about?
Marigold is a girl who grew up on hard times. She is a single mom. Her dad disappeared before she was born. She knows nothing about her ancestry, and she was moved from New York City to Albany, New York. I grew up in New York, so I have a little knowledge there, by her mom to get away from some weird things that were happening in her life. She would go for a test, and there would be a crow knocking on the window who didn't seem very alive. She would get upset at somebody, and dead mice would appear next to her, and she doesn't know what's going on. But she, was just hardworking. She had to work side jobs and everything to get through high school to help her mom out and to make sure that they were surviving. And she gets a letter, right? We all want the Hogwarts letter, but this letter doesn't come from the school, from the administration, but it comes from the very power of this world, which is the wellspring. And that's really shocking to a lot of people. So she goes to this school and she finds out a lot about her ancestry and where she came from. And she meets some very hunky guys.
One thing I'm always interested about when chatting with authors who write in the paranormal fantasy world is when you're writing a book that includes paranormal creatures with different variations of established lore. So let's say vampires and their relationship to sunlight. We have seen that run the gamut from they will explode in sunlight to they turn into a disco ball. And I'm kind of curious, how do you decide which version of that lore will best suit your novel?
It has a lot to do with what you prefer too. Like, I'm not a big fan of glittery vampires, so I don't put them in my novels. But if you need to make those vampires be in the sunlight for some reason, then they're going to need different opportunities and different things to happen in their lives. The world is very complex and full of lots of secrets and lies. So having the vampires be a force of evil, but at the same time giving them some of the more traditional traits. They live in clans with a sire. They aren't super organized. They come from humans. These sort of things helps to make them more complete part of the world, make them a bigger force of kind of chaotic evil, as opposed to someone who is really consistent and easy. So those are the kind of things I'm looking at when I'm choosing what traits they need to have. I want them to be similar to what people think of when they think of a vampire. So it's not totally out of this world, but at the same time, I want to emphasize those traits that are going to make the world seem richer.
And kind of like sticking with the world building for a second, because this is my favorite part about fantasy and paranormal. This book in this series has very layered world building because you have the lore and then you have the magic systems, which are kind of the big picture of the world building. But then you have this rich history, which you kind of alluded to, and the characters that live within that history. And I'm so curious what the process is like for you. Does this all come to you while you're writing, or is this all planned out ahead of time and then you insert that story into that world?
So it's kind of both. I'm a big one for the characters tend to walk on screen and then they're like, hey, I'm here and this is what I'm doing. And I was like, okay, Marigold, you were what? Born in New York City? Really? And it was wintertime and there were marigolds outside the window and that's why your mom named you this? Like things like that just come to me in a big way. But then I also do spend some time going, okay, now this all has to make sense. So here are the classes that I want to have for different kinds of magic. And how are that all going to work together? And so I do have several reference sheets where I go, okay, this is all the pieces that go together here. How does that work? Okay, these are all the council members. What is their relationship to the main characters? Where's their relationship to the world? What is the history that went on here?
And Marigold, who's our main character, is a necromancer. What drew you to this type of magic for her?
Because it's the cool kind. Jeez. Necromancy is fun. There's all sorts of things to it. Actually, I am super inspired. There is a song by Sarah Bareilles called Chasing the Sun, where she talks about the gravestones in New York City. And I just, for some reason, that has stuck it with me for a long time. And necromancy is cool, but I was thinking that like something that connects them to history and to the world in general, to the cycles of life and death, and how does that relate to this whole idea of well springs and ley lines where power comes from?
You know, when we were writing these questions and we were talking about the book, a Sarah Bareilles song was not something I saw coming as the inspiration for necromancy, I will admit.
That's why we asked the questions, though.
Right?
Heir of Shadows starts right in the action. Like we see Marigold in kind of a bit of a scary situation with a client that she works with. Did you always know you wanted to start the book off this way? Because from the start, we kind of see hints of her necromancy.
Yeah, she gets her necromancy comes through the most for her when she's in her normal life, when she's in a scary or upsetting situation. You know, when she's worried about a test, that's when the crow comes to knock on the window. When she's working and she has a client who's not the best, she and her mom work for a cleaning crew, and they go and clean rich people's houses. And of course, there's some guy who's in her way, who's trying to seduce her, trying to molest her. And these kinds of things are what bring out that power in her, because she's trying to defend herself in the only way that she knows how. Right. So she can escape from him. She can run. She can try to hit him. But the necromancy is like, I'm here. Use me. Let me defend you.
And Marigold is such I feel like the word like strong female character like can be overused and overwrought, but she is such a strong character. She's so well defined. Did she come to you first, or did the idea of the academy arrive first?
Kind of both at the same time. Like I ended up writing a paragraph when I was doing my proposal, just even thinking about it was like, oh, look, yeah, there's this girl and this is how her backstory is. And, you can't put all that backstory into the book, but it does feed into who these people are and why they become the people that they are. This has been kind of my lifelong obsession, and that's probably why I write fiction, is that I love knowing why we become the people that we are. And I do love a strong woman coming into her power. Like, that is an ongoing obsession of mine. Like, someone who has had a backstory, a traumatic backstory, a hard life, and they're able to overcome it and really find love and be able to take their own power back.
Do you think there's a fictional character that kind of sparked this love of a strong woman coming into her own? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what in particular. I have always, since I was small, been a lover of stories of orphans who had a hard time, right? So Orphan Annie is silly, but that was like one of those movies that you watched when you were a kid that was like, oh, look, this is, a girl taking her own power, basically, like being rescued, but also able to turn that around and use that for her own growth and development. And I come from a family that has had a lot of hard times. So it's also kind of inspirational to me to see that, like, let's grow and be the people that we can really be.
I mean, I was the little princess girly growing up. So, like, I get that vibe. That VHS tape got a lot of wear in my childhood. So, yeah, we're on the same page.
I think everyone kind of went through that orphan phase where you kind of like picture how you would be in that situation. I also loved the Little Princess.
Yeah, and I also come from a huge family. I have 5 brothers and sisters, so an orphan sounded really good to me most of my childhood. I was like, wait a minute, I could be alone, not have to share my room. All my stuff. My brother was born on my 4th birthday. I have to share my birthday. So
sharing your birth, that's rude of him if he's listening.
Permanent grudge.
Taking it away from sibling rivalry, but sticking with rivalry. This book is told from multiple points of view. And I'm curious what your process is when writing from these different POVs and how you inhabit all of your different characters.
I love doing all the different characters, and really having their full point of view is the best, because you get to see why they're doing all of this. And I love to have this kind of morally gray character who is doing this because they had to. That's what they had to do to survive. Elio is one of my favorites in the book. He is a illusionist, and his parents are obsessed with perfection. And so he has his whole life had to put on the show of being the perfect person, the perfect heir, the perfect royal, the perfect everything. And his only outlet is to play his music on his violin. And so just building that character where they have this background trauma that they are also trying to overcome, because nobody comes to us perfect. It's all the jagged edges fitting together. And I think that's where the true love story comes, right? It's like, I accept you for your jagged edges and you accept me for my jagged edges. And together we can make a unit, right? Whether it's one boyfriend or 3, it doesn't matter. But instead trying to overcome these things from our past, right? We're always trying to work through them. And so that really builds the character for me and gives them a full-bodied sense of.
And how do you balance the paranormal elements and the world building with the spiciness of 3 boyfriends?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's super easy, because paranormal gives you all sorts of extra options for the whole spiciness aspect. I do try to give each character a full romance arc, and they're are certain steps for that. So they might not get it all in the first book. I do plan a trilogy so that they have time over the 3 books to develop each character and each relationship. So then they can have their spicy times, sometimes before they're ready, and then develop it into a full-bodied relationship later. The paranormal gives you an extra opportunity to do some fun things with it. Magic can touch you in different places than hands can. So super fun to explore those options and that possibility.
And you mentioned that, you have the series to build this romance, to build the arc. When you are writing in a series, how much of the plotting is done ahead of time and how much of that plotting is kind of abandoned due to where the story takes you?
All of it. So I plan in advance. I do a summary for each book, and this is where I plan to end up at the end of that book, and this is where I plan the romances to end up. And then they go off and decide that they're going to do something on their own. So not to give any spoilers, let me say, there is a character who is having some problems in this book who I thought would be a full romance arc, and instead there ends up being some hard times at the end. So relationship will have to happen later because the character decided to go in a different direction. The characters often decide that they're going to do things in a different way, and I know it makes all of us authors sound like we're crazy when we're like, well, the character just said they were going to do this and they went off in that direction. But they do. They always do. They decide that there's something else going to happen, and sometimes they'll just throw a wrench in my plans at the end of, in the middle of the book, at the end of the book, somewhere in there, and say like, oh, we're going to have this plot line next book. Okay, then we need to be prepared for that. Let's see what we can do.
And this isn't your first time writing in the series format, nor is it your first time writing in a paranormal fantasy world in the series. Do you have any advice for early or authors who are early in their career who want to write a paranormal series, especially when it comes to keeping track of all of the magic systems? Because I find that impressive.
I think you have to kind of sit down in that system and make it your whole world, right? Like, so you're really understanding and seeing where things work and how they work together. And then give yourself enough direction. I think that's one of the things I did early on is I tried to be a pantser right off the bat and just like write with the flow because the characters came to me so easy. But it really does help to have some reference sheets and have a story Bible and have things that keep you on track. Like, oh, this is what's going on here, and this is this character, and this is what's going on with this character, and this is where we're going with them, and this is how the magic works. And sometimes things will come to you as you go along, and this is a new part of the magic. That's fine. But keeping track of it and keeping it consistent throughout the series really requires a little bit of documentation and file keeping, I guess.
Was that something you kind of learned as you went or something that you did from the beginning?
Oh, absolutely something I learned as I went. My early stories were a mess. And every time I write a new one, I get deeper and deeper into who these characters are and where they're leading me. And I think that helps. I am definitely a character-based author. I go character-driven for all of my stories. Some people are plot-driven, and they tend to be way more about let's have every outline set up in advance. But the characters do tell me where they want to go and what's going on with the series. You need to make sure that you have enough overarching plot to get through however many books you're going to plan for a series. When you have a trilogy, you do need to have a bigger storyline that'll fit that. I actually, after so many years of writing RH, I have a harder time writing it for just a single pair, like one male, female. How do I make that last so long? So it does give me an opportunity to see all the different characters. Yeah.
It just seems boring in comparison.
It does. When you're this into all the characters and all of how they work together, it is a little bit dull. It's like, wait a minute, where's the rest of the story?
And I saw recently that you've started doing serialized content. Has it been a weird transition going from longer series and like full-length books to figuring out how to, I guess, kind of cut the books into smaller pieces?
Yeah, it's a big change for me, and it's one that has been super hard to wrap my brain around. I am a psycho writer, so I will write and then I'll go back and edit, and I'll write, and I'll go back and edit, and I'll write and go back and edit. So by the time I get to the end of the book, I'm done. It's pretty much been edited all the way through. But with serial fiction, you can't always do that. And sometimes you're writing a little bit ahead of the curve. So I have asked my readers to be a little bit patient with me as I learn this new format. But I did want to try it. I did want to see how it engaged with the readers, and it could offer different experiences to readers that I already have, and some extra content for readers who support me. I do have a Substack, and some people pay to support me and buy me coffees. I love them. Thank you so much. But I did want to give them some extra material to work with. I had another idea. The ideas are just rampant. Those are hard. It's how do you keep control of all those ideas?
Do you feel a lot of pressure to, like we talked about direct stores and Substack, do you feel a lot of pressure to kind of jump on that next indie thing that's coming out?
There is a lot of pressure to do all of that. I do try to limit myself to what I can handle at any particular moment. I am trying to expand a little bit. There's just so many opportunities to reach different readers and new readers, and I want to try some of these things. But I try to balance that with I need to have a consistent schedule and do things regularly with my family and not live totally in the imaginary world, right? So I pick and choose the things that I'm going to work on, and I try to follow along with that.
Speaking of balancing acts, you have 3 pen names. You write in 3 different genres. You have your paranormal romance, contemporary romance, and fantasy. Do you find you have a lot of crossover with that readership?
No, not at all. They don't read each other's stuff at all. So I do need to keep, I did try at one point to merge a couple of pen names into one newsletter, because I was like, well, that would be less work for me, but the readers would have nothing to do with it. So they do have very different readership, and I keep them all on the same website, but I try to keep them separate as far as what I'm writing and what I'm doing. I think it's a little strange, honestly, because personally I read everything. Like, I love contemporary, I love fantasy, I love urban fantasy and paranormal romance. I love it all. So I read everything, and I'm like, why don't you all read everything? But but it is a nice break for me. Most of the other stuff that I do is quite short. So they're not full-length novels at all. They're just little 10 to 20K hour-long reads, lunch break reads. So I do them just kind of in between my bigger projects, and I enjoy doing that. And I work with a couple of collaboration groups where all the authors write to a theme, which is super nice. So we can release more regularly and allow the readers to have a whole series to binge of interconnected standalones.
And do you find it difficult to kind of manage the marketing for each of the pen names? Do you have different social channels for each one?
I do. I have limited my social channels to just right now, I'm only doing Facebook and Instagram. I know that there's a lot of opportunity on TikTok. It's just outside of my scope at the moment. So by doing that, I help myself, and then I keep everything for each pen name there. I do have a PA who helps me with my main pen name with Cali Mann, and she produces a lot of graphics, does a lot of posting for me, things like that. So that helps to keep everything on track.
I think with like you mentioned, there's so many things that indie authors can do. And I think that recognizing what your scope is and where your strengths are is so important. Am I correct in this?
Absolutely. It's key. And I am a person who likes to be busy. I love to have a lot of work. I love to be a workaholic. It's one of my favorite things. And when I was teaching, I was writing on the side. So I don't mind being busy, but I need to know where my balance is. It's important to choose the things that resonate with you and the things that you can work with easily. So, I'm trying the serial thing, and we'll see if it works. If it doesn't work for me, then I will let it go. But for now, I'm just exploring and seeing how the options are.
I actually have one other question about the serial thing, and it comes to writing process. Now, with serialized fiction, if I understand it correctly, it's a lot of mini cliffhangers to get people to come back and keep reading. Have you, like similar to your novels, do you have everything plotted out in advance and you kind of figure out where those breaks are? Or is this a little bit more flying by the seat of your pants?
Definitely a little more flying by the seat of your pants. I don't always plot the entire novel, or if I do, the characters don't always agree with me. So sometimes that doesn't happen in the end. But I am trying to get at least the first novel of the serial out so that I can then break it up and try to find the right places to break it as we go along so that it can be a little bit more cliffhangery.
As a lover of romance yourself, are there any tropes that you've read recently that you're like, okay, now I have to release something with this trope?
Personally, I love Korean dramas. K-dramas are like my crack right now, my chocolate. I love them. And I will watch them like crazy. So every time I get a chance to put like them sharing an umbrella or some other weird K-drama trope in there, I'm like, yeah, there we go. Let's add that in. So I don't know if the readers are going to follow me on this, but but I do find it really funny. Especially in my contemporary, to just throw in like, okay, now we're holding hands and running through the rain, and or whatever the K-drama trope is, the back hug. So, because they're really sweet moments, and I think that we don't do enough of them in Western romance, and especially even in things like Hallmark movies, which is all about that. It's all about those sweet moments. We still don't give it as much importance as they do in the Asian dramas, because they're the concept of skinship, of touching one another, is so fraught in their society. So I find that really fascinating, and I'm throwing all those in there. So if there's some weird moment where they run off holding hands, it's because the K-drama did it to me. I can't help it.
I love all those micro tropes. I saw one on Twitter the other day that was like, and then he takes off his glasses as a moment. I was like, ooh, that's a good one. There's so many little ones like that.
Or fall asleep on her shoulder. Yes. He falls asleep on her shoulder. She falls asleep on his shoulder. Or he puts a little jacket over her when she's asleep on the desk because they've been working all night together. Like, boy, I love them. They're so wonderful. Yeah, there's lots of tropes that I really enjoy, but those have been the ones that have been fascinating me lately.
Similarly, as alluded to, or not alluded to, mentioned, you write paranormal, contemporary, and fantasy. Are there any genres you want to explore as an author?
I have been wanting for the longest time to write a cozy mystery, a paranormal cozy mystery. I have ideas for it. I just have not done it yet. And I think I'm a little bit afraid of it, which I think is really funny. Like, I write these really intricate novels with lots of backstory, lots of magic systems, and it's like the mystery. I'm like, I watch a million mysteries. I love watching mysteries. I should be able to put a mystery together. But someday I'll write a cozy mystery. It'll probably come out under my fantasy name. I think it would be really fun. Just the whole idea of figuring out who done it and all the pieces to that.
I look forward to reading it when it comes out. I'll keep my eyes peeled. Not that you don't have a lot going on already.
Right.
We're just adding to your list of projects now as we go on.
Now, taking a little bit of a turn, our director, Tara, who you mentioned, was actually at the same conference as you in Atlanta, I believe, this past weekend. Mm-hmm. And during that conference, you gave a talk on book blurbs, which, as we have heard time and time again, are one of the most important parts of putting together your novel. I was wondering if you had a piece of advice that you could share on writing a solid book blurb.
I think the key piece for most beginning writers is that you don't want to write a synopsis. The reader isn't there to read your novel. They're there to like pick out the few things that they're interested in. So they want to see those things highlighted. You should be short. Your book blurb should always be short, to the point, and very catchy. And I often say, like, the beginning part of your novel, set it up, but don't give them the whole story. So make it as short and quick as you can.
Now, with the popularity of micro tropes, as we were talking about within romance, and readers knowing specifically what they want to read, do you find this has made writing book blurbs more difficult?
I think it makes it easier because you can literally just put a list of tropes sometimes and the readers will read it. My best friend's brother and the single mom next door, it writes itself. So people will pick up things very easily that call to them. And you really want to hook those readers with what is the most exciting part of it for them. In romance, and actually in all genres, we talk a lot about what are ids, what are the things that really call to us in a book, what makes you excited about it. For me, it's like secret passages, oh, I can't get away with a book without secret passages. Those are the best. The dark academy part, the whole gothic spheres and secret rooms, love it. I'm there, right? So what are those things that call to you as a writer in a book? And those are the things that are going to call to your readers, right? Because those are the readers that you want to find. Sometimes I find in paranormal romance, we have like two branches. We have the super smexy side, which is just all, romance, and there's no plot and there's no discovery of the world and the fantasy. And then you have the more fantasy romance side where it really is a really rich world, and making sure that you call to the readers that you want on your side is a challenge. But sometimes these things are the things that call to them. I love a super intelligent guy. One of the characters in this book is a really smart guy, and it's one of my, my ids. And I love somebody who's an artist who plays music. I love, someone who's into martial arts. Like, what are these things that you're looking for? I love the broody hero who, has such dark past and he can't seem to let go of. And the magic systems that are cool, but fairly simple to understand so that, the reader can really get involved in them. Just so many things that you look for in a book, right? And you're like, oh yeah, it's the things that you pick up a back cover and you're like, oh yeah, this is the book for me.
Do you ever find it difficult to market kind of to a reverse harem audience with some of the restrictions that different social media platforms might have?
Yeah, it can be difficult. I think they know what they're looking for the most part. Social media isn't usually too restrictive for reverse harem because our covers don't generally have the guy with the, bare chest on it. Like, that's not a problem for us. We usually have a girl, especially if it's paranormal. She's surrounded by wolves or whatever the other characters are. Or it might be object covers are super big right now. I think that Wickem Academy is probably going to have an object cover, and those are something that's pretty easy to market in different places. Sometimes the retailers are a little bit stricter, and having trouble getting ads to work for Amazon, for example, is pretty much you can't do it for a reverse harem. So that's where the restriction comes in, I think, for the most part.
And you mentioned kind of like when you're writing your blurb, finding like, what you said, your id, like the thing that speaks to you in your book. Do you ever find it challenging to balance the book you want to write because of the things that speak to you with what's hot right now in the book market?
Yeah, it is. It's a challenge. Dark romance has been super hot lately, and I'm not really a dark romance writer. I can do a little bit of bully, but my romances are primarily, because they're so character-based, why he's doing the bullying. Where it comes from. And so it doesn't have that whole dark romance, I really want to hurt you feel to it. And they always have a bit of optimism because even if they came from this really hard background, they're going to find love and they're going to be there for each other to defeat the big bad, whatever that is. So dark romance was a really hard time for me when it was super popular because that's not what I write. And so what I've learned to do is say no. These are just things that I'm never going to write. Dark romance is something I'm never going to write. I had a few ideas for it, and I gave them to other people. I said, here, you can write this book. Alien romance is something I'm never going to write. It's just not my speed. Even though it's pretty much shifters in space, it's just not my speed, so it's not something I'm going to write. So it's nice when you can be very confident and say no to something. Versus something like cozy mystery where I'm like, well, maybe that would be fun. Maybe I should write it. And that can lead you to a whole other trail.
And other than Wickem Academy, what are you working on now?
What am I not working on? So my serial is called In the Grip of the Shadow, and that is coming out on my Substack, and I'm also releasing it on Ream Stories. So Substack does have some restrictions as far as how much sexy times you can put in there. So the enriched version will be on Ream Stories. And I'm also doing some small shorties for collaborations. The most recent one was My Professor is a Demon, which just came out last month.
I love the enriched version is available elsewhere. I think that is phenomenal phrasing.
That's a great way of putting it.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up and I let you go, I do have one more question. You've mentioned several times that you have some collaborators. What is the process like collaborating with others? Have you found that it has changed your writing process at all, or have you learned anything really cool from your collaborators?
Well, mostly what I do now these days is collaborations in a series. So we each write our own book, but it's all on the same trope. So everybody's writing about vacation romances, for example, or mountain men or something like that. So it's all on a trope. My professor, the demon, everybody was writing about demons. So I can set it in my own world and I can use my own characters, but it goes with the series because we're all writing on a similar topic. And so people who like to read those kinds of stories know where to go. I have co-written before. It works. It depends on the people, but it is always a challenge in some way or form, because if they write the first draft and then you go over it, or you try to write every other chapter, or it's hard to get your voice to go in there together. And there's some people that I have worked really, really well with, and I really enjoy doing that. And then there's others that we've really struggled to get through what we needed to do to write together.
Well, we won't ask you to name names. I'm kidding. We never would. But as we wrap up, where can our listeners find you online?
They can find me on Facebook and Instagram and my website, which is www.calimann.com. And they can find me on my Substack.
Amazing. Well, we will include links to all of the above in our show notes. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Sure. Thank you, Cali. This was so fun.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you are interested in picking up Cali's books, we will include links in our show notes. If you are enjoying this podcast, please be sure to rate, review, subscribe, tell all your friends. And if you're looking for more tips on growing your self-publishing business, you can find us at kobowritinglife.com. And be sure you're following us on socials. We are at Kobo Writing Life on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads.
This episode was hosted by Laura Granger and Rachel Wharton, with production by Terrence Abrahams. Editing is provided by Kelly Robotham. Our theme music is composed by Tearjerker, and thanks to Cali Mann for being our guest. If you're ready to start your publishing journey, sign up today at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing!